Most people think silver is just some old, useless metal. Coins, jewelry, maybe something your grandfather kept in a drawer somewhere. But I think people are missing what's really happening here, because behind the scenes, governments are suddenly stockpiling silver. Not just investors, not just silver fanatics or silver bugs as they call themselves. We're talking governments. And when governments start stockpiling a strategic resource, I pay attention, and so should you. Recently, Elon Musk reacted to concerns about silver shortages and China restricting exports of silver by simply saying, "This is not good." Last year when silver was trading around $80 an ounce. Now think about that for a second. Why would the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, one of the biggest industrialists on Earth, be worried about the supply of silver? It's because silver isn't just a precious metal anymore. It's become one of the most important industrial materials in the modern world. Electric vehicles, solar panels, AI infrastructure, military use, semiconductors, power grids. Modern civilization runs on this stuff. And here's the problem. The world suddenly needs massive amounts of silver, right as supply is becoming more constrained. For 6 straight years now, global silver demand has exceeded supply. Inventories have been shrinking. Industrial demand keeps rising. In other words, even if prices go much higher, new supply can't just magically appear overnight. And now, the US government has launched something called Project Vault, a strategic critical mineral stockpile initiative that includes silver. That alone should make you stop and think, because governments don't stockpile things they think are not important. They stockpile things they believe they may not be able to get enough of later. And personally, I think the silver story is becoming one of the biggest supply and demand stories in the entire world right now. No hype, just the fundamentals. And in this video, I want to walk through why governments are suddenly stockpiling silver, why industrial demand is exploding, why supply may not be able to keep up, and why I believe it's only a matter of time before the market fully wakes up to what's really happening. By the way, my name is Noel Lorenzana. Welcome back to my channel. Please like and subscribe to stay connected, and none of this is financial or investment advice. Silver isn't what most people think. I think one of the biggest reasons people underestimate silver is because they're still thinking about silver the way the world looked 30 or 40 years ago. Back then, silver was viewed mostly as jewelry, silverware, coins, maybe for film. But the world has changed, and silver quietly became one of the most important industrial metals on Earth. That's the part I don't think the average person fully understands yet. Silver has the highest electrical conductivity of any metal. That matters, because now we live in a world absolutely obsessed with electrification and technology. Electric vehicles need silver. Solar panels need silver. AI infrastructure needs silver. Those dreaded data centers need silver, lots of it. Military systems need silver. Advanced electronics need silver. Power grids need silver. Even modern medical applications use silver because of its antibacterial properties. The metal is used everywhere, and unlike gold, a lot of silver gets used up, it's consumed, lost inside products, never to be recovered again. Gold, on the other hand, mostly gets stored in vaults. Silver gets used up. That's a huge difference. And here's where the story starts getting really interesting. At the exact moment the world is demanding more silver than ever before, the market has been running structural supply deficits for 6 straight years, according to the Silver Institute, meaning more silver is being used up than is being replaced year after year. And eventually that becomes a serious problem, because you can only drain inventories for so long before the market starts realizing, wait a minute, there may not actually be enough physical silver available at these prices. And honestly, I think that realization is already starting to happen quietly behind the scenes. That's why Elon Musk's comment caught my attention so much, because Elon understands manufacturing, he understands supply chains, he understands raw materials. And when somebody like that publicly reacts to silver shortages and says, "This is not good," I pay attention, because this isn't some random Reddit post. This is coming from somebody running companies that depend heavily on industrial metals and large-scale production. And I think what he understands is that silver is no longer just competing with investors. Now it's competing with the future industrial needs of the modern world itself. The world may not have enough silver. Global silver markets have now been running deficits for multiple consecutive years, meaning the world is consuming more silver than it's producing, and that gap isn't small. Every single year for the past 6 years, more silver has to come out of existing inventories just to meet demand. Think about that. Even COMEX silver inventories, they've fallen from prior highs and remain historically low. Now, some people might say, well, Noel, if silver prices go high enough, won't miners just produce more silver? Problem is, silver is mostly produced as a byproduct of mining for other metals like copper, lead, zinc, even gold. So even if silver prices rise dramatically, that doesn't automatically create a massive new wave of production. The supply response is very slow. New mines can take years to permit, years to finance, and take many years to build. And on top of that, many existing mines are already dealing with declining ore grades and rising costs. So the world suddenly finds itself in this really strange situation where industrial demand is accelerating rapidly, but supply growth is sluggish and rigid. That's a dangerous setup, especially for a metal this important. And then you add China into the equation. China is one of the dominant players in global silver refining and industrial manufacturing. And reports of export restrictions and tighter controls has already started raising alarm bells. Because once countries begin prioritizing domestic industrial needs over global supply, the game changes. Now it's no longer about free market supply and demand. Now nations start thinking strategically. They start thinking about national security, industrial security, supply chain security. And honestly, I think that's exactly what we're starting to see right now. The early stages of governments realizing certain critical materials may become very difficult to secure in the future. Project Vault changes everything. But in my opinion, the biggest development in this entire story is what governments themselves are now doing. Because recently, the United States launched something called Project Vault, as I mentioned earlier. And I don't think enough people are talking about this. Project Vault is tied to the US government's push to secure critical minerals and strategic resources. And silver is included. Think about that for a second. Silver, the same metal many people still think of as coins or collectibles, is now being treated as strategically important to the future of the United States. That's huge. And what's interesting is, this actually isn't the first time the United States treated silver as strategically important. For decades, the US government held enormous stockpiles of silver. At one point, billions of ounces. It was considered essential for money, for industrial use, for national security. The government even controlled silver through programs like the Defense National Stockpile. Why? Because even back then, silver mattered a lot. And over time, much of that silver was sold off. But now, the world is changing again. Supply chains are becoming more fragile. Industrial demand is exploding. Countries are becoming more protective of their critical resources. And suddenly, silver is starting to look strategically important again. That's why I think Project Vault is worth paying attention to. Because to me, it feels like the government's quietly recognizing that silver may be far more critical to the future than most regular people currently realize. Silver isn't just a precious metal, it's an industrial necessity because modern economies can't function without it. The future requires massive amounts of silver. At the exact same time, supply remains constrained. That is an incredibly bullish setup fundamentally, in my opinion. The global resource race has already started. And I think the silver story is really part of something even bigger happening globally right now, because countries around the world are starting to realize that globalization is not as reliable as they once thought. For decades, the assumption was basically, don't worry, the global market will provide. Need energy? You can import it. Need computer chips? You can import those too. Need rare earth elements? You can get them from China. Need silver? Somebody will sell it to you. But now, countries are becoming much more protective of their strategic resources. China has already shown it's willing to restrict exports of critical materials when it believes its own industrial interests are at risk. The United States is responding by trying to secure domestic supply chains and strategic reserves. And there are even rumors and reports that countries like Russia may also be increasing focus on precious metals and strategic resources as geopolitical tensions rise. Whether the rumors are true or not, the broader trend is clear. The world is entering a period where resources matter more and more. And governments are increasingly acting like they know shortages could become a serious issue later on. The market hasn't fully woken up yet. And honestly, I still don't think most people fully understand what may be happening here, because this isn't just another commodity story anymore. This is about what happens when the modern world becomes deeply dependent on a material that may be far more scarce than people realize. Governments are noticing it. Industry is noticing it. Elon Musk is noticing it. And slowly, the market is starting to notice it too. But I still think we're early, very early, because silver is still being priced in many ways like the world hasn't changed. But the world has changed, and eventually markets tend to catch up to reality. Now, of course, silver will remain volatile. Anybody who's owned silver or mining stocks already knows that. There were periods where investors sat underwater for years. I personally experienced this. That's part of this market. But long term, I think the fundamentals are becoming impossible to ignore, because at the end of the day, the world wants more silver than the current system appears capable of comfortably supplying. And historically, those kind of imbalances don't last forever. Eventually, something adjusts, usually the price. Maybe nothing dramatic happens tomorrow. Maybe silver continues frustrating people for a while longer. But personally, I think governments quietly treating silver as a strategic asset may eventually be remembered as one of the biggest signals in this silver story. Agree, disagree, let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to know the best way to buy a little silver, just head over to your local Costco and check out this video right up here. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.